If you're paying attention these days, you know that there is a lot of focus on what divides us and pulls us apart. More and more, we have been training ourselves to pick sides in a long list of topics and then see one another through the lens of what side we're on. But believe it or not, underneath all of this noise and division and separation, there is one thing that unites every single person across the world, regardless of how old or young you are, where you come from, or what party you belong to. And that is, we all feel powerless here. We feel powerless against time and the aging and illness that ravages our bodies. We feel powerless against disasters like hurricanes and earthquakes, fires and floods. We feel powerless against the shootings, the wars, the violence we see every day. We feel powerless against systems that don't work for everyone but feel too big to change, powerless against losing people we love, and the list goes on and on. I think this is why we love that Marianne Williamson quote so much, where she said, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." In a world that feels very random, being told that we are powerful beyond measure means that we don't have to feel so at mercy of forces that feel so much stronger than we are. We love to hear that, but how much do we really believe it? The good news is that the Course does say that we are all immeasurably powerful. It says we only feel weak because we have chosen to believe in things that aren't true. And so what I want to talk to you about today is, what kind of tangible power does the Course say we have? And this isn't just the power to change our experience of the world by changing our mind about it, although that is a Course teaching and that is important. What we're talking about today is the power we have to shift the physical conditions of the world itself. What does the Course say about our ability to do that? What is blocking our ability to do that? And how can we harness the power that we have so that we don't feel so vulnerable and afraid all the time? Now, if you're thinking that you can't even change the conditions of your own life, so there's no way that you can change the conditions of the world, please know that that is not true. There are countless examples of very ordinary, everyday people who are proof that God breaks through into this world all the time. Not too long ago, I watched the movie Harriet. I hope all of you have seen it. It's a great film. And Harriet is about the story of Harriet Tubman and her escape from slavery, and how, at enormous risk, she made 13 trips back to the South, north-south, back and forth, 13 times, and freed 70 other people. And you see in the movie how, on these incredibly dangerous journeys, if she had been captured, she surely would have been tortured and killed. But you see how on these journeys, it's well known that Tubman would wait for guidance on when to go, when to stop. She would make her whole group sit in silence for hours if that's what she heard. She would step off of well-known routes and so on. And in the end, Tubman never lost one person on any of her trips to the South. She said she made it because God told her what to do, and I believe her. Another example of the divine breaking through in our world, of course, is Helen Schucman. Helen lived a very normal life in New York when Jesus stepped in and said, "This is a Course in Miracles, please take notes." And everything changed. There are so many people who say this can't be Jesus, but Given the depth of wisdom in the course, the originality of the course, the way it came through, the perfect iambic pentameter throughout, and so on, Helen said she heard Jesus, and I believe her. One final example is my own life, where I was traveling around doing workshops on mindfulness many years ago, when all of a sudden I started to see a pulsing purple light, and I heard the sound of a loud, booming voice in my head that just kept saying, teach, over and over again. It sure seemed like God wanted me to teach. And here I am, because I believed him. So regardless of whether you feel that you've experienced a higher hand at work directly in your life, although I know that many, if not most of you have, you cannot say that you are not powerful beyond measure, because if you are watching or listening to this, it's the very power of your mind that got you here. Remember, in the Course, the world isn't God's masterpiece where he sends his beloved children. It's the illusory place that we made, where we come to hide and be our own boss. So in other words, you wanted to experience yourself outside of heaven, and guess what? You do. So whether you're aware of it or not, this is a massive demonstration of just how powerful your mind is. In the Course, there's a section near the end of the text called the Savior's Vision. And it's not as well known as Laughing Away the Tiny Mad Idea, but it also lays out the basic idea of how we got here. So the Savior's Vision talks about our desire to be a separate self with space between us and other people, and how that desire caused us to fashion a self-concept that made our wish come true. That section says, no one who understands what you have learned, how carefully you learned it, and the pains to which you went to practice and repeat the lessons endlessly in every form you could conceive of them, could ever doubt the power of your learning skill. There is no greater power in the world. The world was made by it, and even now depends on nothing else. Just pause on that for a moment. There is no greater power in the world than your mind. The world was made by it, and even now, the whole world depends on nothing else for its very existence. Elsewhere in the Course, Jesus goes on to say twice that you and he are equal as learners. You can look up that phrase, equal as learners, which means that your mind is so powerful that you have the potential to achieve Jesus's level of spiritual mastery. And I know that sounds unbelievable. To some, it will sound even blasphemous. But what if it's true? What if it's true? Robert and I did a podcast recently on the compatibility between A Course in Miracles and Christianity. And we were talking about how easy it is to just blithely assume that the Course isn't real, or there's no way that this could have come from Jesus. And one of the points that Robert made, which I agree with wholeheartedly, is that if you're a Christian, there isn't a cost to being flippant about the idea that the Course isn't true, except for the fact that if you're wrong, you have entirely missed the second coming to this world of the leader of your faith and all that he wanted to share with you. Given those stakes and how high they are, whether you consider yourself a Christian or not, let's say for just a moment that you are willing to go there with the Course and entertain the idea that there is no power on earth greater than your mind. So the next step would be, naturally, that you would want to know the reason for why you should take such a claim seriously. And the answer the Course gives to the question of why your mind is so powerful is that it says you were created by God with all of his attributes, one of them being his power. Now, there are many places in the Course that underscore this idea, but I pulled a couple of my favorites, beginning with lesson 320 in the workbook. Here it is right here. My Father gives all power unto me. And that lesson reads, the Son of God is limitless. There are no limits on his strength, his peace, his joy, or any attributes his Father gave in his creation. What he wills with his Creator and Redeemer must be done. His holy will can never be denied because his Father shines upon his mind and lays before it all the strength and love in earth and heaven. So in other words, it doesn't matter how good or bad or deserving we think we are, or anyone else is for that matter. God's attributes, his strength, his peace, his joy, his love, these are all your true reality, and these are all the foundation of every mind. And the Course gets more specific about what this means for us in lesson 38 of the workbook. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. And that lesson begins with, your holiness reverses all the laws of the world. It is beyond every restriction of time, space, distance, and limits of any kind. Your holiness is totally unlimited in its power because it establishes you as a son of God, at one with the mind of his Creator. Through your holiness, the power of God is made manifest. Through your holiness, the power of God is made available. And there is nothing the power of God cannot do. So lesson 320 tells us that our minds share God's attributes. And here we see that one of those attributes is also God's holiness. And that holiness gives us some remarkable abilities. Your holiness can reverse all laws of the world. And isn't that what Harriet Tubman was doing when she heard God speaking to her? The lesson says your holiness is beyond all restriction of time. Isn't this how Jesus, who is at least 2,000 years old, was talking to Helen Schuckman? None of these things make sense according to the laws of the world, but they happened. And according to this lesson, the exact same holiness at work in Harriet Tubman and Helen and Jesus and everyone else who has broken the laws of this world is in you right now in equal measure. And lesson 38 goes on to say that God's holiness in you can remove all pain, it can end all sorrow, can solve all problems, it can help anyone, and it can save anyone. And if you find this too hard to believe, I want to share with you an experience from Masa Craig. I saw Masa was here, so I'm glad to share this. Masa wrote a story for our story project at the Circle, and I've shortened it down quite a bit, but you can read the full post on our website if you like. And in her story, Masa was writing about driving home from a vacation where she says, quote, we were driving through a no-cell service zone along a narrow, winding road where vehicles often speed. I was already feeling uneasy, and to calm myself, I kept returning to my lesson of the day. I placed the future in the hands of God. She writes, up ahead, I noticed a man lying on the ground near a car with two others standing by him. He was dangerously close to the road. My husband focused on the drive, passed by without really seeing what was happening. We had our tent trailer hitched behind the truck, and with cars so close behind us, turning around would have been tricky. Still, I said, there's someone who needs our help, and told him what I saw. We had to go back. As my husband found a spot to turn around, I checked my phone, no service. What do? We are not experienced with first aid, and something was clearly medically wrong. We were the first upon the scene. As we approached, I silently prayed, how can we help him? Please let us help him. The man on the ground looked terrified, and his two companions were visibly distressed. I asked how we could help, but as I stepped forward, the man began shouting, so I backed off to give him space. Meanwhile, my husband began directing traffic. The man on the road was lying far too close to the road. I could feel the part of me that wanted to jump in and fix everything, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't. I slowed down my breath. I looked him in the eye and relaxed myself, hoping it would transfer to him. Then, in a wave of what felt like divine orchestration, help arrived. A large RV pulled over. After seeing me wave it to avoid the man, the driver rolled down her window and asked what happened. I said, I'm not sure. He's having some kind of emergency. And she responded, well, I've got a paramedic in the back. As the paramedic got out, another man from the opposite side of the highway ran over. He had first aid training. Then a third person approached quickly and assessed that the man had just experienced a seizure. Before we stopped, no one had. And once we did, everyone who stopped after us turned out to be a medical professional. We left the man in capable hands, and with the cluster of vehicles around the scene, it was now clear to other drivers to slow down. And Masa ends her story by saying, even though I wasn't able to help in a hands-on way, she says, I truly believe Jesus answered my prayer by sending those who could help. Now, doesn't this feel like an example of how the Course says, through your holiness, the power of God is made manifest? Through your holiness, the power of God is made available. And there is nothing the power of God cannot do. I found myself struck by a couple of parts of Masa's story. The first is that at the beginning, maybe you caught it, she was calling upon her practice line. I place the future in the hands of God. And she was doing that before she even knew that anything was wrong. And that placed her in a state of what the Course calls miracle readiness. And the second thing that stood out to me is that there's the part where Masa said she slowed down her breath and looked at the guy who was having the emergency in the eye and relaxed herself, hoping that her healing would transfer to him. And lo and behold, after that, help showed up. So again and again, we've all heard stories like Masa's, or we've experienced them for ourselves. And these stories just seem to defy the laws of the world. And again, the theme we see running through the Course is that, yes, you really do have the power to defy the laws of the world. So what if we put these things together and take seriously that maybe the Course really means it when it says no miracle can ever be denied to those who know they are one with God? Maybe we shouldn't just think that the Course is full of poetic language that's designed to inspire us and make us feel good. Maybe we should take the Course literally. And along that line, what inspired me to want to do this message in the first place is that in working on another project, the text planner, finishing up the text planner, for those of you who are waiting on that, I noticed there are 4 references to the phrase, thy will be done, in the Course. And what's interesting to note is that in every single one of them, the Course is talking about your will, not God's. And that's fascinating, isn't it? We all know that line, thy will be done, from the Lord's Prayer in the Bible. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's God's will that the Bible's talking about. In the Course, there's a section near the end of the text that says, your will be done, meaning our will, in heaven as on earth. So there's a take on the Lord's Prayer. This is forever true. It matters not where you believe you are or what you think the truth about yourself must really be. It makes no difference what you look upon or what you choose to feel or think or wish. For God himself has said, thy will be done, and it is done to you accordingly. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. It doesn't feel this way to us. We're not exactly walking around feeling like the universe is bending to our will. And yet the Course says that we all have this power. So what's going on here? What's getting in the way between the power the Course says we have and our direct experience of what we can do in this world? I mentioned earlier that the Course says we aren't powerless. We only feel that way because we've chosen to believe in things that aren't true. There's a lot that can be said about that, but essentially it all boils down to the fact that we feel powerless because we have chosen to see the body as our true reality. So in other words, we believe that we are weak and vulnerable because we've identified with what is weak and vulnerable. We've identified with our body, which is forever giving us some new thing to worry about. We've identified with our ego, which claims to be strong, but is incredibly fragile. We've identified with our specialness, which is constantly going up and down based on what other people think about us. And when we see the world through the lens of these things, what do we see? We see bodies that are well one day and get sick the next. We see relationships that come and go. We see ourselves happy in one moment and grieving in the next. In lesson 136 of the workbook, the Course talks about what choosing to identify with what is not real does to our mind. It says, and so the body is more powerful than everlasting life, heaven more frail than hell, and God's design for the salvation of his Son opposed by a decision stronger than his will. His Son is dust. The Father incomplete, and chaos sits in triumph on the throne. Such is your planning for your own defense. In other words, when we hook our identity into things that are fragile, we shouldn't be surprised when we feel so fragile, when we feel like things are unstable, and when we have no peace. When you feel powerless, it's because you are looking out into the world and seeing impermanence, seeing instability, fear, suffering, and death. So if the problem is identifying with what is weak and unreal, then the solution, of course, is to identify with what is powerful and real. We need to shift our identification from the body to the spirit. The Course says that we have a choice to see bodies or to see egos, to see bodies and egos or to see the spirit, and that is the single most important choice that we can make here. The single most important choice that we can make here. It says that what you decide in that choice determines all you think is real and hold as true. Therefore, you will feel powerful when you rest on a different view of reality, where God's laws are true and nothing else exists. Now, this does not mean that you deny the body or you deny the needs that we all have in the world of form. It only means that as we do the things that we all have to do in this world, we do them with a spiritual vision, knowing that there's something deeper going on here than what our physical eyes tell us is true. As an example, this week we began our level 2 miracle minded healing course. And in our very first class, we're talking about this same idea that healing in the course, physical healing in the course, rests on a different view of reality. In course-based healing, you don't focus on getting rid of sickness. You deal with sickness while focusing on letting go of false perception and trusting that as you heal your mind, the illness in your body will go. And the same thing is true with course-based forgiveness. Those of you who are part of our forgiveness challenge that we hosted not too long ago may remember that we repeatedly said miraculous forgiveness rests on a different view of reality. You don't forgive by letting go of the grievance, focusing on the grievance and trying to let it go. You forgive by letting go of false perception. And as you do, the grievance goes. Now, these are two areas where you have a choice in where to put your faith. To put your faith in illness and the body, to put your faith in the other person's ego and all that it did to you, or to put your faith in your totally unlimited power as a son of God at one with the mind of your creator. It's very easy to look at the world and think, it's so disastrous here. What do I do? Where is God? The Course is saying he's right here and he's trying to work through you. He's right here and he's trying to give you all of his power so that he can change this world through you. How else is he going to change it? So I want to close with a quick review of all that we've covered today. We began by naming the pain that we all feel in this world. We feel like we're constantly getting yanked around by forces that seem much bigger than us, the forces of time and illness and disaster and violence and so on. We feel small and powerless in the middle of those forces. But the Course gives us an entirely different picture. The Course says your mind is not weak. It is actually the most powerful force in the world. The Course says you share God's attributes. You share his strength, his peace, his joy, his love, and his holiness, regardless of whether you think you deserve them or not. And the Course says that through the holiness of God in you, his power is made manifest in the world, and there's nothing that his holiness working through you cannot do. This holiness can reverse the laws of the world. We saw that with Harriet Tubman listening to guidance and never losing a single soul on her trips to the South. We saw it with Helen taking down notes from Jesus that has changed millions of lives. We saw it in Masa's story where her miracle readiness opened the door for a chain of the perfect helpers to arrive. And we've seen hints of this in our own lives, moments when that help just came into your mind or came into your circumstances, where peace just arrived out of nowhere and you knew that God has broken through into the world once again. That's what he does. The Course teaches us that the barrier to claiming God's power is never his willingness. He's always willing. The barrier is our identification with what is weak and what is temporary. And the moment we decide to rest our identity on spirit versus the body, that's when we reclaim all of those attributes from him that have been ours all along. You can listen to a sermon like this and you can think, those are comforting words. Those are inspiring words. But it's meant to be far more than that. What could be completely different in your life if you really understood that your mind was the most powerful force on earth? What good could you do in this hurting world if you allowed the power of God to work through you? It's your decision. what you do with the Course's messages. But as we look around this world in all that is in need of healing, remember, you are not meant to be the bystander in the middle of a broken world. You are meant to be the place where God's power breaks through and changes the world. Thank you.